Have you ever seen a child ask for something so simple and yet so dangerous that it changed the lives of everyone around her? Because this was not a request for money. It was not a request for food. It was not even a request for help. It was a little girl standing in the middle of a polished corporate courtyard, looking up at one of the richest men in Lagos and asking him the one question nobody had ever dared ask before. "Sir, can you be my daddy for one day?" And what neither of them knew in that moment was that those 7 words were about to destroy walls, expose secrets, shake a billion-naira empire, and build a family where none of them expected one. Welcome to Promiscuous Stories, where every tale holds a lesson, every voice carries a mystery, and every ending will leave you thinking. If you love powerful stories full of mystery and magic, click the subscribe button.
Like, comment.
Now sit and relax as we dive into the story. The rain had just ended over Victoria Island, leaving the city glossy and restless. Lagos, after rain, always looked like it was trying to remember itself. The roads steamed. Glass towers glimmered. Traffic roared impatiently. Streetlights reflected in puddles like melted gold. Outside the headquarters of Virion Global, one of the most powerful corporate groups in the country, the after-work rush had already begun. Executives walked briskly across the courtyard with laptops tucked under their arms. Drivers stood near black SUVs checking the time. Security men greeted people whose faces they knew and watched carefully the ones they did not. Above them all, the name Virion Global shone in silver lettering across the tower glass. It was the kind of building that made people lower their voices when they entered. And at the edge of that courtyard, beneath a flame tree that still dripped rainwater from its branches, sat the man who owned it all. Tade Adebayo, founder, chairman,
CEO, investor,
public symbol of discipline and corporate brilliance. The kind of man whose face appeared in business magazines beside words like visionary, ruthless, strategic, transformational. At 42, Tade had become one of the youngest corporate giants in West Africa. He had money that moved markets, power that opened doors before he arrived, a reputation for precision so sharp that grown men in suits rehearsed their sentences before stepping into meetings with him. But that evening, sitting on a cold stone bench with his tie loosened and his phone buzzing ignored beside him, Tade looked like none of those things. He looked tired, not physically tired, soul tired. He had just come out of a 3-hour board session where a merger worth billions had been discussed in the dry, efficient language of men who no longer remembered that business decisions touched actual human lives. Someone had talked about acquisitions. Someone else had talked about restructuring. Another had talked about labor optimization like human beings were clutter on a spreadsheet. Tade had listened, responded, approved what needed approving. But somewhere in the middle of that meeting, something inside him had gone silent. He had built Virion Global from almost nothing. He knew what it meant to fight, to grind, to outthink everyone in the room. He knew what hunger looked like. He knew what it meant to grow up with too little and promise yourself that one day, nobody would ever be able to deny you anything again. And he had kept that promise. So why did it all feel so empty now? Why did every success lately feel like chewing paper? His phone buzzed again. He didn't look at it. Then he heard a small voice. "Excuse me, sir." He turned lazily at first, expecting perhaps a staff child, a law student, maybe someone sent to fetch a parent from one of the offices nearby. Instead, he saw a little girl standing in front of him in a yellow raincoat decorated with cartoon ducks. She was tiny, maybe 6 years old. Her school bag looked too large for her back. Blue beads clicked softly at the ends of her braids as she tilted her head and studied him with an expression far too serious for a child. "Do you know how to look like somebody's daddy?" she asked. Tade stared at her. For a moment, he thought he had misheard. "I'm sorry," he said. She took one step closer. "I asked if you know how to look like somebody's daddy. Because you already look important. So, I think maybe you can do it." The corner of his mouth twitched before he could stop it. It was the first almost smile he had felt all day. That's an unusual question, he said. Why? The girl let out a soft sigh, the kind adults made when they were already exhausted by life. Tomorrow is Family Achievement Day in my school. Everybody is coming with one adult. Some people are bringing their daddy. Some are bringing their mummy. Some are bringing both. But my mummy is meant to be at work, and if she leaves again, they may sack her. So I need somebody who looks responsible. Tade leaned back slightly, studying her now. There was no fear in her face. No hesitation. No performance. Just purpose. And you chose me? She nodded firmly. You were sitting alone, she said. And important-looking people who sit alone are usually either sad or available. That one caught him off guard. He let out a quiet laugh. A real one. The girl brightened immediately, as though she had solved the first part of the problem. So, she continued, can you do it? Tade folded his hands and looked up at her properly. What exactly do you need me to do? She adjusted her school bag with both hands. Come to my school tomorrow morning. Sit in the front. Stand near me when they call my name. Clap loud. Maybe smile a little.
Teachers like that.
If anybody asks, you can say you're my uncle or guardian or anything that sounds rich enough not to raise questions. Tade almost laughed again. Anything that sounds rich enough? Yes, she said simply. It helps. Now, he was no longer just amused. Now he was listening. Where is your mother? He asked. The girl pointed toward a side entrance beside the corporate tower. She works inside. He frowned. In this building? She nodded. She cleans offices. That changed something in his expression. What is her name? Amaka Yusuf. He sat up slightly. He knew the payroll in aggregate. He knew department heads. He knew executive teams. He knew strategic units, labor costs, turnover figures. But he did not know Amaka Yusuf. And somehow, that realization sat uncomfortably in his chest. And your name? He asked. Imani. That's a beautiful name. She lifted her chin. My mummy says it means faith. Tade looked at her for a long second. The courtyard noise faded into the background. He had sat through rooms full of men asking him for contracts, influence, approval, money, protection. This little girl was asking him for presence. No leverage. No manipulation. No angle. Just one day of being seen. Then the school coordinator, Mrs. Akanam, hurried over and nearly lost her composure when she recognized him. By the time everyone settled inside the assembly hall, whispers were already spreading from row to row. That's him. The Virion man. Why is he here? Which child belongs to him? Amaka kept her back straight and ignored them. Tade sat beside her like the whispers did not exist. Imani waited near the stage with the other children, clutching index cards and wearing the sort of serious expression children wore when they were trying very hard to be brave. When her name was finally called, she walked to the microphone and stood on the little wooden platform so she could reach it properly. My name is Imani Yusuf, she said, voice clear. The hall quieted. My topic is the kind of leader I want to become. A few parents smiled politely. Imani went on. When I grow up, I want to be the kind of leader who knows everybody matters. That made a few people pay closer attention. Not just the people in offices with AC, she continued, but also the people who clean the offices and mop floors and stand at gates and carry files and fix things that other people break. Now the room was truly quiet. My mummy says honest work has dignity, she said. So, if I become a leader, I will know people's names. I will not shout because I am rich. I will not forget the people downstairs. Amaka's grip tightened on the coffee cup in her hand. Tade did not move. He simply watched the stage. And today, Imani continued, I brought somebody from a tall building. He is important, but he still came. So maybe important people can learn too. Soft laughter moved through the hall. The teacher looked nervous. A few parents turned toward Tade. But Tade stayed still, eyes fixed on the child. Then Imani ended with the words that broke something open inside him. A leader is not the person at the top. A leader is the person who makes people below them feel seen. Silence followed. Then Tade stood up first and clapped. Not the gentle, polite clap of a guest. A full clap, a proud clap, a clap that said this mattered. The entire hall joined in. Imani's face lit up like morning. She ran off the stage and straight into his arms. That was the moment one of the parents recorded. That was the moment that later went viral. That was the moment everything changed. By evening, the clip had already found its way onto blogs. By night, the internet had done what it always did: take something tender and turn it into spectacle. Billionaire CEO attends cleaner's daughter's school event. Virion boss and mystery child spark questions. Who is the woman behind the viral video? Amaka saw the first post while washing plates in her small kitchen. The plate slipped in her hand and nearly shattered. Her face was blurred in one image but still recognizable. Imani's school uniform was visible. Tade's name was everywhere. By the second blog post, the comments had already begun. Gold digger. PR stunt. Secret family. Poor girl strategy. Office affair. Amaka turned off her phone and pressed both hands against the sink. She had known this might happen. The world never let poor women stand beside powerful men without inventing a motive. There was a knock at the door not long after. When she opened it, Tade stood outside. Alone. No suit. No assistant. No performance. Just concern. I'm sorry, he said immediately. Amaka folded her arms. For which part? The cameras or the people already calling me names? His jaw tightened. I didn't invite that attention. But it came with you. He did not deny it. That made it worse somehow. She stepped aside and let him in because Imani was in the bedroom and because exhaustion had made anger feel too expensive. The apartment was small but clean. Children's drawings covered one wall. A table fan whirred in the corner. There was a faint smell of detergent and tomato stew in the air. Tade took all of it in quietly. This is why I said no, Amaka said in a low voice. Your life is too loud. Mine cannot survive loud things. Tade looked toward the room where Imani slept. Do you want me to disappear? He asked. The question was direct. Too direct. Amaka looked at him and felt the answer catch painfully in her throat. Because if he left, Imani would feel it. And maybe if she was honest, so would she. I don't know, she said at last. Tade nodded once. That's fair. She exhaled sharply. Why are you doing this? He answered without rehearsing. Because your daughter asked me for something pure. She said nothing. He continued. Do you know how long it has been since someone asked me for something that had nothing to do with money, power, Aki, SS, or advantage? His gaze dropped briefly. She did not care who I was. She only wanted someone to show up. Amaka's expression softened just a little despite herself. She gets attached, she whispered. So do I, he said. That changed the room. Before she could reply, small footsteps shuffled from the bedroom. Imani stood there half asleep in oversized pajamas, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Is he gone? She asked. Tade turned immediately. No. She nodded, satisfied. Good. Because Saturday is my debate final. Amaka nearly laughed from sheer disbelief. Tade almost did too. And somehow, without either of them deciding it aloud, Saturday happened. Then another day. Then another. At first it was small. He came to the debate final. He brought books. He learned that Imani hated pap but would eat oats if enough honey was added. He sat cross-legged on the floor helping her with reading exercises while Amaka cooked in the small kitchen pretending not to watch. He began to notice things. How Amaka soaked beans overnight to save gas. How she stitched tears in school uniforms by hand instead of buying new ones. How she smiled more with Imani than with anyone else, but even those smiles carried fatigue underneath. He also noticed how quickly Imani began to orbit around him. Not because she was needy, because children knew sincerity faster than adults did. One Saturday morning, he found himself in Amaka's kitchen trying to fix a leaking tap with instructions from a video and complete overconfidence. Water sprayed everywhere. Imani shouted with laughter. "You are rich, but not naturally useful," she declared. Tade, soaked at the front of his expensive shirt, accepted this verdict with dignity. Amaka laughed so hard, she had to hold the counter for support. It was the first time he had heard her laugh without caution in it. He thought about that laugh later that night more than he wanted to admit. Slowly, routine formed around them. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just human. He started showing up for dinner sometimes. Started calling before he came. Started learning where the extra plates were kept. Started asking Amaka if she had eaten rather than assuming. One night, after Imani fell asleep on the couch during a cartoon, Amaka sat across from him at the dining table and finally asked the question that had been waiting. "What happens when your world gets tired of this?" Tade looked up. "My board. Investors. Executives. The people who think everything is strategy." Her voice was calm, but guarded. "What happens when compassion becomes inconvenient for your reputation?" Tade leaned back slowly. "They're already tired of parts of me," he said. "They just haven't realized I no longer care." "You say that now." "I mean it." Amaka looked away. Men say many things before life tests them. That told him more than she intended. He watched her quietly. "Who hurt you?" he asked softly. She gave a faint, humorless smile. "That is not a short story. I'm not in a hurry." She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Imani's father left when she was 3 months old. He said responsibility found the wrong person. I got the message after he had already disappeared." Tade's face darkened. "I never begged him to come back," she continued. "I never chased him. I just learned. You survive. You adapt. You stop building your life around hope." Tade said nothing for a while. Then, quietly, "And what are you building it around now?" She looked at him. "That is exactly what scares me." The problem came 2 weeks later. And like many problems in corporate environments, it did not arrive loudly first. It arrived as whispers. Someone in the building had taken screenshots. Someone had fed gossip to a blog. Someone had decided that a cleaner and a CEO appearing in the same story could only mean ambition, seduction, or scandal. By Monday afternoon, an anonymous article had been circulated among staff. It accused Amaka of using her child to gain access to Tade. It hinted at favoritism, suggested inappropriate involvement, implied she had manipulated a public image for personal gain. By noon, people were pretending not to stare. By 2, people were no longer pretending well. At 5:40, HR called her in. At 6:10, Amaka walked out of Virion Global suspended pending investigation. She sat at a bus stop in Yaba, wearing her uniform, holding her employee badge, and staring at nothing. The shame was what hurt most. Not because she had done wrong. Because people had decided her dignity was disposable. A black car stopped near the curb. Tade stepped out. He must have come directly from work. His collar was undone. His expression hard. "Did you know?" she asked before he could speak. "I found out minutes ago. They suspended me." "I know. You should leave."
No.
She laughed bitterly. "This is what your world does. It eats women like me and calls it process." Tade crouched in front of her despite the damp pave.
Meant.
"Look at me."
She tried not to.
Then did. His eyes held something fierce and controlled. You will not lose your job because cowards needed gossip to feel powerful, he said. Amaka swallowed hard. I do not want your pity. What I feel for you is not pity. The words landed between them.
Still.
Undeniable. Her breath caught. What do you feel? She asked before she could stop herself. Tade answered plainly. I feel too much to keep standing outside it. That was the first time he said it, even if not in the neat language of love. Amaka stared at him like the world had shifted. Traffic roared behind them. A hawker called out bottled water. Rain threatened overhead, but neither of them moved. Finally he stood and held out his hand. Come home, he said. She looked at his hand for a long second. Then she took it. The next morning, Virion Global woke to an official statement signed personally by Tade Adebayo. Not PR language. Not soft corporate evasion. A direct statement. He condemned harassment of junior staff, ordered an independent internal review, reinstated Amaka with full pay effective immediately, and ended the message with words no one in that company expected from him. Leadership without dignity is failure in expensive clothing. Virion Global will not punish the vulnerable to protect the cowardly. The board panicked. Executives whispered. Analysts speculated. But Tade walked into the emergency meeting that followed, set the tone in the first 60 seconds, and made it clear that any leader who could not tell the difference between professionalism and cruelty was welcome to resign before lunch. No one resigned. By evening, the source of the leak was discovered. A senior executive, threatened by internal reforms, too arrogant to believe a cleaner's life could become the line that cost him his own position.
He was dismissed.
Quietly, efficiently, without sympathy. That night, Tade came to Amaka's apartment with food in one hand and a school project kit for Imani in the other. Imani opened the door first. Did you and your office fight? She asked.
For now, he said.
She stepped aside with ceremony. You may enter. Amaka stood near the small table watching him. There was a different kind of silence between them now. Not uncertainty. Recognition. Later, after Imani had fallen asleep over coloring pencils and half-finished homework, Tade and Amaka sat outside on the tiny balcony. The city murmured around them. Generators hummed. A neighbor's television leaked through the wall. A warm breeze moved the edge of the curtain behind them. Amaka was the first to speak. You changed a whole company over this. Tade rested his forearms on his knees. No, he said. The company was already sick in places. I just stopped pretending not to notice. She looked at him. What are we doing? He turned toward her fully. I think your daughter invited me to one school event and accidentally dismantled my entire life. That pulled a soft laugh out of her. Then silence again. He reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted. She didn't. I don't know how to do this halfway, he said. Not with her. Not with you. Amaka's voice dropped almost to a whisper. That scares me. It scares me too. She nodded. Good. And then he kissed her.
Slowly. Carefully.
Not like possession. Like a rival. Months passed. Not in fantasy. In life. Imani lost a front tooth and charged visitors 50 naira to inspect the gap. Tade learned that parent-teacher meetings were somehow more intimidating than investor calls. Amaka began sleeping better, laughing easier, leaning without immediately apologizing for the weight of her existence. Tade stopped rescheduling family time around work and started rescheduling work around family time. He missed one international summit because Imani had a spelling bee and insisted he was now part of the support structure. He attended. She came second and cried in the car until he bought her ice cream and told her, truthfully, that courage was not first place. One evening, stuck in traffic on 3rd Mainland Bridge, Imani said drowsily from the back seat, If Uncle Tade marries you one day, will I still have to call him uncle? Silence filled the car. Amaka almost laughed from shock. Tade gripped the steering wheel more tightly. What would you prefer? He asked after a moment. Imani yawned.
Daddy.
But only if he earns it properly. Then she fell asleep. Neither adult spoke for the rest of the drive. The proposal happened on a Tuesday. No cameras. No luxury restaurant. No violinists. Just home. Amaka was in the kitchen slicing tomatoes. Imani was at the table pretending to do homework while actually drawing dresses on the margins of her notebook. Tade walked in, looked at the two of them, and understood with terrifying clarity that this was the first place in his life where he had not once needed to become someone else. So he knelt beside the table. Imani gasped so loudly her pencils fell. Amaka turned. For one suspended second, all three of them simply stared at one another. Then Tade spoke. "I spent years building a life that impressed the world," he said. "But the first life that truly changed me was this one. Small kitchen.
Noise.
Homework. Late dinners.
Honesty.
You." Amaka's eyes filled immediately. He reached into his pocket and opened the ring box. "I do not want temporary anymore. I do not want almost family. I want all of it.
The ordinary.
The difficult. The joyful. The tired. The real." His voice softened. "Amaka Yusuf, will you marry me?" Imani whispered fiercely. "Say yes before I explode." Amaka laughed through tears. Then cried. Then nodded. "Yes," she said. "Yes." Imani exploded anyway. Their wedding was held in a badon in the garden of Amaka's grandmother's old compound. Not a ballroom. Not a hotel. Not a pageant of wealth. Just lights strung through mango trees. White chairs. Soft music. The smell of food and flowers and evening air. People who mattered came. People who merely wanted spectacle did not. Imani wore cream and gold and threw flower petals with excessive emotional authority. She glared at guests who did not seem sufficiently moved by the event. Amaka walked down the aisle radiant and calm, wearing satin and the quiet power of a woman who had survived enough to know the value of being loved gently. Tade waited at the front, not as the CEO of Virion Global, not as a public figure, not as a man people feared, just as a man who had finally come home. When it was time for vows, he looked first at Amaka, then at Imani, then back again. "The best thing that ever happened to me," he said, walked up in a yellow raincoat, and asked if I knew how to look like somebody's daddy. I thought she needed a favor. I did not know she was offering me a future. Amaka covered her mouth. As tears slipped free. He continued, "I say yes again today. To the woman who taught me that strength can still be soft. To the child who taught me that being chosen is more powerful than being admired. To the life we built not from fantasy, but from consistency." Then Amaka spoke. "You are never the kind of man I imagined I would marry," she said, voice trembling. "You are too distant, too polished, too powerful to trust. But love did not come to me dressed like a dream. It came dressed like presence, like protection, like a man who stayed. There was not a dry eye left after that." Then she turned slightly toward Imani. "And this little girl," she said, smiling through tears, "she was the first brave one among us." Imani placed a hand over her chest like she had just received a national honor. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the applause that followed was full and joyful and clean. No gossip. No performance. No borrowed roles. Only truth. That night, long after the food had been eaten and the music had faded and the guests had gone home, Tade found Imani half asleep in a chair with flower petals still caught in her braids. He lifted her gently into his arms. She stirred and mumbled, "You earned it properly." He smiled into the quiet. "Earned what?" She barely opened one eye. "The daddy title." Then she drifted back to sleep. Tade stood still for a long moment, holding the child who had unknowingly rewritten his life. In the next room, Amaka waited for him. His wife. Their daughter. Their future. Outside, the night settled warm and calm over the old compound. And inside, for the first time in a very long time, nobody was pretending to belong. They simply did. And sometimes, the most powerful stories do not begin in boardrooms or mansions or with men who think they control everything. Sometimes they begin with a little girl in a yellow raincoat, brave enough to ask for love out loud. And this time, love stay.
Ed.